There's something deeply human about the eyes. They're called the windows to the soul, and for good reason. Yet for some people, those windows feel too exposing. They look away, they shift their gaze, they find something infinitely more interesting on the ground than in another person's face. And if you've ever noticed someone doing this, you might have wondered why. Is it shyness, rudeness, deception, a lack of confidence? The truth is far more complex and far more human than any of those simple assumptions. Because avoiding eye contact is not a character flaw, it's a language. And if you learn to read it, you'll understand something profound about how people experience the world, about vulnerability, about the intense energy that exists between two pairs of eyes meeting. Most of us are taught that eye contact is the foundation of communication. Look someone in the eye, it shows respect, it shows honesty, it shows engagement. We're told this from childhood, and we internalize it so deeply that breaking eye contact feels like breaking trust. But what happens when eye contact feels like exposure? What if for some people meeting someone's gaze doesn't feel connective? It feels invasive. It feels like standing naked in front of someone when you're not ready to be seen. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating about eye contact avoidance. It's not always about discomfort with others. Sometimes it's about discomfort with being perceived. There's a difference, and that difference matters deeply. When you make eye contact, you're not just communicating information. You're allowing yourself to be read. Your pupils dilate or contract. Your eyelids twitch slightly. Micro-expressions flash across your face in milliseconds, revealing emotions you didn't intend to share. For someone with social anxiety, this involuntary transparency feels dangerous. They fear that eye contact will expose something they're trying desperately to hide. Doubt, fear, unworthiness, and so they look away, not to be rude, but to protect themselves from being truly seen. It's a kind of psychological self-defense mechanism. If I don't look, you can't see me. If I don't establish that connection, I can maintain the illusion of safety. Because eye contact, when you really think about it, is intimate. More intimate than many people realize. Think about the last time someone held your gaze for longer than usual. Didn't it feel like something shifted? Didn't there seem to be an unspoken communication happening? Something that bypassed words entirely? For neurotypical people, this feels natural, even warm. But for people with neurodivergence, particularly autism, eye contact can feel overwhelmingly intense. The brain is processing an enormous amount of information all at once. The other person's expression, their micro-movements, the emotional content beneath their words. Many autistic individuals describe making eye contact as cognitively exhausting. It's like trying to have a conversation while simultaneously solving a complex puzzle. The mental effort required to maintain eye contact while also listening and processing and responding is simply too much. And here's what neurotypical people often don't realize. Looking away isn't a sign of disinterest. It's frequently the opposite. By breaking eye contact, the person is freeing up cognitive resources to actually listen to what you're saying. They're choosing to understand you better by not meeting your eyes. This is the paradox that surrounds eye contact avoidance. The very thing meant to build connection can actually undermine it for some people, and when that person looks away, it's not rejection, it's an act of love, an attempt to truly hear you by stopping the visual overwhelm. But eye contact avoidance isn't only rooted in neurodivergence. There's also the matter of emotional vulnerability. Some people avoid eye contact because they're afraid of what they'll communicate without meaning to. Their emotions are too close to the surface. Have you ever tried to lie while making direct eye contact with someone? It's nearly impossible. The body betrays the mind, your eyes dart, your pupils respond, and so if you're trying to maintain some emotional distance, if you're in pain and don't want to admit it, eye contact becomes a threat. People who are grieving, depressed, or struggling often look down or away. Not because they're untrustworthy, but because they're terrified of being asked if they're okay. Because if someone looks them in the eye and asks with genuine concern, they might break, the dam might crack. So they preemptively avoid that moment of potential breakdown by avoiding the eyes that might trigger it. It's a form of emotional self-preservation, and it's profound in its wisdom. Better to look away than to fall apart in front of someone who might not understand. There's also a cultural dimension to eye contact avoidance that we rarely discuss. Different cultures have entirely different norms around direct eye contact. In some Asian, African, and Latin American cultures, direct eye contact can be considered disrespectful, especially when speaking to someone of higher status or age. In these cultural contexts, looking down is not a sign of shame or social anxiety. It's a sign of respect. It's a demonstration of humility and deference. Yet when someone from one of these cultural backgrounds enters a Western space where eye contact is expected, they might be misread. Their culturally appropriate behavior becomes pathologized. They become labeled as shy, lacking confidence, or emotionally withdrawn, when in reality they're simply following the rules they were taught. They're honoring their heritage, and yet the Western world judges them for it. This is a form of invisible discrimination. It's not loud or obvious, but it shapes how people are perceived, what opportunities they're given, what assumptions are made about their competence and character. There's also something deeply gendered about eye contact expectations. Women are often taught to soften their gaze, to look demure, to avoid the commanding stare associated with authority and power. They're told that direct eye contact can make men uncomfortable, that it might be interpreted as aggressive or unfeminine. So many women learn early on to temper their gaze, to look away not from lack of confidence but from an overabundance of it. They're reining themselves in to fit into what's expected. Their eye contact avoidance is not weakness, it's adaptation. And then there's the deeply troubling reality of power dynamics. When someone holds less power in a situation, meeting the gaze of someone with more power can feel dangerous. Employee avoiding eye contact with their boss isn't necessarily anxious. They're responding to a real power differential. A person of color might avoid direct eye contact in certain situations, not from shyness, but from a learned wariness about being perceived as threatening. They've internalized, often unconsciously, the message that their directness will be misread as aggression. These are not individual psychological issues. These are responses to real structural inequalities. And when we pathologize eye contact avoidance, we're often pathologizing survival. We're treating adaptation as dysfunction. But let's return to the individual level for a moment. Even setting aside neurodivergence, culture, and power dynamics, there's something else happening when people avoid eye contact. Something about the modern world itself. We live in an age of screens. We've spent years, some of us most of our lives, interacting through devices rather than face-to-face. Our brains have adapted to this. Eye contact feels unusual, unnatural even, like an outdated skill. Young people in particular are growing up with reduced face-to-face interaction. When you've spent most of your social interactions through text, through video, through curated presentations, the sudden demand for direct eye contact in person can feel jarring, unscripted, dangerous in its unpredictability. And there's something to this. When you're texting, you can think before you respond. When you're video chatting, there's a screen buffer. But in-person eye contact? There's nowhere to hide. The response is immediate. The stakes feel higher. So some people, especially younger people, are developing eye contact avoidance, not from disorder, but from genuine unfamiliarity. They're strangers to face-to-face connection, and strangers often feel cautious, protective of their space. There's also the phenomenon of what we might call eye contact anxiety, the anticipatory dread of making eye contact before it even happens. The brain spirals into worry. What if I look too long? What if I look too briefly? What if my expression is wrong? What if they see something in my eyes that repels them? This anxiety creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The person becomes so focused on avoiding eye contact that they behave awkwardly, which makes the other person uncomfortable, which confirms the original fear that something is wrong with them. But here's what's important to understand. There's nothing wrong with them. They're simply caught in a loop of anxiety that's become amplified by the very mechanism meant to prevent it. They're avoiding eye contact to feel safe, but that avoidance is actually creating more unsafety. Breaking out of this loop requires compassion, both from others and from the person themselves. It requires recognizing that eye contact avoidance is not a moral failing. It's not a sign of untrustworthiness or social incompetence. Some of the most intelligent, empathetic, perceptive people you'll ever meet avoid eye contact. They might be processing information at a deeper level than those who maintain steady eye contact. They might be so attuned to the other person's emotions that they're reading them from the subtle shifts in voice and body language rather than relying solely on the eyes. There's a kind of wisdom in eye contact avoidance, a recognition that not all connection happens through the eyes, that presence can be conveyed through listening, that attention can be demonstrated through the quality of engagement, not the direction of gaze. When someone avoids your eyes but remembers every detail of something you mentioned weeks ago, they're showing you they were truly listening. When they look down but are fully present in the conversation, they're showing you that their internal world is engaged even if their external presentation suggests otherwise. There's also something profoundly vulnerable about making eye contact. It's a surrendering of control. It's a moment of mutual exposure. And for people who've been taught their entire lives that visibility equals danger, that being seen equals being judged, eye contact avoidance is an act of self-protection that makes perfect sense. Trauma survivors often struggle with eye contact. When you've learned that being seen leads to pain, that the gaze of others can precede harm, avoiding that gaze becomes essential. It's not weakness, it's survival. And healing from this for those who want to is not about forcing yourself to make eye contact. It's about slowly, gently, at your own pace, learning that some gazes are safe, that some connections are possible, without the risk being as high as your nervous system believes it to be. For those who avoid eye contact, there's often an inner richness that the world doesn't see. They're watching, they're listening, they're observing the nuances of human interaction with an intensity that the casually engaged might miss. They notice when someone is unhappy despite their smile. They sense tension in a room before anyone speaks. They pick up on the unspoken currents beneath surface conversation. In a way, they're more connected to what's really happening, even though they're not making direct eye contact. Maybe that's the secret that eye contact avoidance reveals. That connection is not a fixed thing. It doesn't require a particular form. It doesn't demand that everyone relate in the same way. Some people connect through words, some through presence, some through the deliberate avoidance of intrusive gaze. When you stop seeing eye contact avoidance as a flaw and start seeing it as simply a different way of engaging with the world, everything shifts. You realize that the person avoiding your eyes might be doing so with intention, with wisdom, with their own valid reasons that have nothing to do with how they feel about you. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth understanding. Because in a world that demands so much from people, that asks them to be constantly available, constantly visible, constantly readable, there's a quiet rebellion in looking away. There's a statement being made. I exist beyond your perception of me. I am more than what you can read in my eyes. My worth is not dependent on your ability to see into my soul. The next time you encounter someone who avoids eye contact, resist the urge to judge. Resist the urge to assume. Instead, try to understand. They might be autistic. They might be anxious. They might be grieving. They might be from a different culture. They might simply be a person who connects differently than you do. They might be someone who listens deeper by looking away. Someone who's protecting something tender, someone who's choosing presence over performance, someone who understands that the most meaningful conversations sometimes happen in the spaces between the gazes. And that in itself is a kind of beauty, a reminder that we're all walking around with our own internal worlds, our own reasons, our own valid ways of moving through the world, even if we're not looking you directly in the eye while we do it.